I'm back. Ricky Varandas. This is the Ripple Effect Podcast, another episode. Today we have Casey Gane-McCalla. He is the author of Inside the CIA Secret War on Jamaica. And so we talk about the history of Jamaica. We talk about the CIA's involvement in Jamaican politics. And Casey is a very knowledgeable guy. His book is very informative, very interesting. And we also talk about a bunch of other stuff. We talk about the Clintons. We talk about the Bushes. We talk about the JFK assassination. We talk about some past guests I've had on my show who've written books and have talked about those topics, and a bunch of historical events and current events with the Middle East. So really interesting show. We hit on a bunch of different things. He's also known as Mighty Casey. He's a musician. He's a rapper, hip hop artist, and he has a video for White Girls, I believe is the song, that broke some records on BET. So you guys might know him from there. If you're a hip hop fan, if you watch BET, then you might already know the name or know the face, and he might sound familiar. But yeah, he apparently his video did really well, and he had some songs that were pretty popular. So check that out. And like I said, very interesting guy, very interesting show. We had a lot of fun talking, and we hit on a lot of topics. So I'll keep this intro short, but also remember, subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, RV Theory 6, or just search for the Ripple Effect Podcast. You'll find it. I also have a new documentary playlist where you can find a bunch of interesting documentaries. I also have released my Theory 6 music, the whole EP that was just released not too long ago. I have that whole EP and all the music videos on one video on our YouTube channel, so you can find that. And if you want to support the show, Theory 6 Music is a great way to support the show. You can find it anywhere you can find digital downloads. So do that. Rate the podcast, rate the music, purchase the music to support the podcast. It's a great way of contributing. And I think that's it for now. Follow me on Twitter at RVTheory6. If you have guest suggestions, if you want to just share some of your opinions or whatever, I always love hearing from listeners and hearing from fans. So with that said, enjoy the show. Peace.
What's up, Ricky?
What's up, Casey?
Hanging in there.
Thanks for being with me. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Big up Massachusetts.
Yeah. It's I didn't realize you're so close. It's amazing. James Perloff is also from your neck of the woods. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
James Perloff. He's from Cambridge? Probably. I'm not sure.
I think.
What is he? Is he a writer?
Yeah, he wrote "Truth Is a Lonely Warrior." He's been on my show. He's been on. He also was a part of. Basically, I think he wrote the script for the recent documentary called Shadow Ring, and it's by Free Mind Films. They did the film A Noble Lie, the Oklahoma City bombing film. They also did State of Mind, The Psychology of Control, which is a really, really good one because that goes into history and how those in power learned how to control the masses, and you know, it got to a point where you couldn't control people with violence anymore. You had to start controlling them with because as we became more civil, as you know, as a culture and as society, but you had to control them in other ways with propaganda and mind control and all that stuff. So, and it goes back to Machiavelli and his techniques, and so it really is like a history film, but it's the history of kind of mind control and how to control the masses. So it's I think a lot of times people don't realize how much of what we're taking in daily is influencing our everyday decisions and what we like and what we dislike and what we believe and not believe and all these things. I remember during I think it was the first Bernie Sanders Hillary Clinton debate, and I think CNN was the only channel that was saying that Hillary won, and then every poll was saying that Sanders won, and then I think a couple days later, after CNN basically keeps saying that Hillary won, they took their own poll, and then it said I think the majority of people said Hillary won, and it was all based on them saying this over and over again. So it's amazing how a channel like that can really change perception and change opinion just by saying the same thing over and over again. So it's
I was watching the documentary CNN had on the JFK assassination, and they put up Bugliosi and all these pro lone gunman people, and that's how I kind of knew CNN was definitely in the pocket of the government, because they had it so slanted. They ridiculed James Garrison. They made James Garrison look like he was a homophobe who was out to get gay people, and they totally just took one side of the story and didn't put the other. Yeah, I'm not a CNN. CNN, MSN. Did you see the MSNBC with Trump, where they were telling Trump they'd let him have the easy questions? So it's all a big facade to me. With modern politics.
Absolutely. You ever see the documentary Hacking Democracy?
You know what? I've been meaning to see it. It's either on Netflix. I have every streaming service in the world, so I think it's either on Netflix or Amazon Prime or one of those. It's on my list.
On my YouTube channel, I believe, and I know documentaries get taken down all the time on YouTube, but I know right now I have it on my YouTube channel. I created a documentary playlist. I was always watching stuff, and I always telling people, hey, check this out, check that out. And so then I'm like, you know what? And I'm always referencing films on the podcast. So I'm like, I'll just make a playlist, and anything I can find on YouTube, I'll put on there. And that way, if somebody is bored one night and wants it, because there are a lot of good documentaries on YouTube. There's a lot of shitty ones too.
There's so many.
Yeah.
So the bad thing about documentaries is they're not sourced all the time.
Yeah. Well, that's
so you kind of make stuff up. So but there's so many great ones. I watch them all the time. I did a lot of my research off YouTube, and old shows like Dave Emery and Nip Tuck, Alternative Views. There's so many great sources of both going on right now. I was just on the Opperman Report. He has great hosts, great authors who I look up to. That's why I connected with you, because you had so many authors on that I respected from before. So I was like, oh, this guy's he has the right people on there, and it's so many great, and there's good ones like Dark Legacy, which I think is a bit goofy, but
I was supposed to have the
simple
filmmaker on once, and then schedules kind of, I think something happened with him personally, and then he couldn't, for some reason he couldn't do it that day, and then the next day he wanted to do it, I couldn't do it, and then we kind of lost contact. But yeah, that's a weird film, because it's like, I hate to say, but he connects some dots that aren't necessarily there, and even though there are some links to the Bush family and the JFK assassination, to do a whole film on it and pretend it's the biggest link or it's the biggest culprit, I think is a little, I think it gets people a little off track, because there's a lot of people that are obviously to blame. I just did a almost 3 hour podcast with Lamar Waldron, and he wrote 3 JFK books, and he's a historian, and Tom Hartman from The Big Picture helped him with a couple of his books. He also did a book on Watergate and Nixon. But it seems like he's really knowledgeable, especially when it comes down to the mob and knowing just all the anti-Castro Cubans. He knows so many names and really knows how they're all linked together. But it seems like so many people have their opinions get in the way of kind of, the facts, not getting away in the facts, but they'll leave certain things out or consider certain information more important than other information to kind of.
So when I wrote my book, I didn't know too much about the JFK assassination at all, so I didn't come into it. At first I wanted to find out about the CIA in Jamaica, and then I started, some of the anti-Castro Cubans like Orlando Bosch and Luis Posada. When I started researching them, they traced back to the JFK assassination. So I did research, and I wasn't trying to find out this one person did it. And because if you have an agenda before you start writing, you're going to take any information that fits your agenda, or anyone who said anything that fits your agenda. So I came in, not without I just knew that the CIA was involved in Jamaica, and that's pretty much all I had before coming into it. But I think David Talbot just wrote a really good book, The Devil's Chessboard, which implicates Allen Dulles, and of course he was on the Warren Commission, and Allen Dulles was really close friends with Prescott Bush.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't put it all in the Bush family. They're part of a big conglomerate of people, including the mob, the CIA, anti-Castro Cubans, Houston Oil people who kind of were behind the JFK assassination. It wasn't just the Bush family, or wasn't just Allen Dulles or just LBJ.
or but a lot of these people either were involved in the conspiracy or the cover-up of the assassination, which is so intriguing.
It is, because there's so many layers to it. It's like it's endless.
So many.
I mean, you could spend years just researching the JFK assassination and all the characters involved. And,
yeah,
I've had Roger Stone on, who wrote the book.
Roger Stone is great. Yeah, I disagree with him politically. I'm not a Trump supporter, but he is. But he tells the truth, and I that's what I believe. I think if we can come to some agreement with all people who know the truth, then we can disagree on capitalism, socialism, and that type of stuff. But if we're living in a state of propaganda where we don't know the history of our own country, no matter what your agenda is, whether it be socialism, capitalism, libertarianism, you're gonna have a very skewed view because you've been believing a lot of BS that's been fed to you for the years. But yeah, I watched a lot of the interviews with Roger Stone, and I think Ed Opperman started Ed Opperman show, and he had St. John Hunt, Howard Hunt's son, on, and they're writing a book about the Bush family. Or I think it's out. I'm not sure if it's out, but I don't know if it's going to be as good as Russ Baker's book, because Russ Baker's book was great. He did a lot of great research for that.
Yeah, I've had him on too, and that's, for example, like when I had Lamar Waldron on. We talked about, I wanted to kind of, I guess, bounce some of the other theories off him, and I talked about having Roger Stone on and the LBJ book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, and, he kind of disregarded that LBJ had anything to do with it. Then, we brought up Russ Baker, and he's like, he loves Russ Baker, but he thinks he puts too much, highlights Bush too much in the whole JFK assassination. So you could tell, like, it's like, and I agree with him. I mean, obviously, the case against LBJ wasn't obviously the head honcho and the only person involved, but Lamar Waldron also disregards Alan Dulles. I'm like, well, there's some links with Alan Dulles, and he's like, well, I haven't seen any real evidence of it. But I mean, not to say anything bad about Lamar Waldron, because he does amazing work, but I think it was just an example of how once you have something set that I've made up my mind to some extent that these are the people who are responsible, then you kind of disregard other stuff. And then some of the evidence, like, for example, when I talked about Alan Dulles, and I told him, I'm like, he obviously, everybody knows the Bay Pig story, and he was fired by JFK. Now he's put on the Warren Commission. I mean, that alone seems a little suspicious. And then he told me that it was known that Robert Kennedy didn't mind him being on there, and I'm just like, well, how do you know this? And it's like, and there's there's basically no evidence that any real proof proving that he didn't care, or he officially said something like he didn't mind or whatever. So, but yet he would take that in because it kind of helped his I guess perspective that it was the mob and that's who was to blame. And actually after that show, he was trying, him and Russ Baker and a bunch of people were trying to get a bunch of files that were archived released. And after that show, I don't know if this is true or not. I don't want to take. I even told Lamar, I'm like, I'm not going to take credit for this because I don't know if it was my show. But soon after my show, I think a day or two after it was released, that the archives released a bunch of files that I guess they've been asking for. And he's like, I don't know if the FBI or the CIA listens to your show, but he's like, after your show, they release all this stuff we've been fighting for a while. And I'm like, well, that's a little scary. But again, I mean, it's who isn't being listened to? If you know enough about the NSA, we're all being listened to.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think there's some files that are supposed to come out in 2017.
Yeah.
So I think this, and at the president's disclosure, that's another important reason why the next election is so important. But so I was I did some looked into Scalia a little bit, and I always thought Scalia was a horrible right-wing person, but Scalia kind of made his bone by saying, hey, the government should be investigated. I think this might be one of the HSCAs when he was just a circuit judge, but he made it a point that the government should be investigated for the Kennedy assassination. That was one of his first big legal briefings. So I don't know.
And his death is kind of mysterious too. I mean, there's something. I mean, not to get all conspiratorial on not everything's a conspiracy, because that's the thing, and then you lose credibility when you start thinking everything is a conspiracy. But there is something weird about the fact that somebody so highly known and popular and highly ranked would not have an autopsy. And I guess I forget who wrote the article about how, I guess it was the marshal who came in and said that it was natural causes or it was an accident or whatever, and that there shouldn't be any autopsy. But I guess some detective from Washington said that that's not the way you handle things, that they're not actually, they don't have the I guess they're not knowledgeable enough to look at it and say that, hey, you shouldn't have an autopsy, that it's considered a accidental death or natural causes, and that there should have been an autopsy. So it is kind of weird. I mean, it just, there's been this is the thing about conspiracies, is that anytime you get in these conversations with people, it's people are like, oh, but you're jumping to that conclusion, or not everything is a conspiracy. But I always make the example, I'm like, if you have a girlfriend who lies and cheats on you all the time, next time you think you catch her in a lie, or she might be lying, I'm like, you're going to assume she's lying before you assume she's telling the truth. I'm like, the government's no different. You look at the things that are absolutely known, everything from, getting involved in Central and South America. I don't know if you ever watched the documentary War and Democracy, but that by John.
Another one I've been meaning to watch. That's on Amazon. Yep.
Yeah, that's another.
I did watch it actually. Yeah.
Yeah, by John Pilger. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Pilger. I think it's Pilger, and the Australian filmmaker, and he breaks down how they got in, the United Fruit Company, and how they got involved in all these Central and South American countries.
Yeah, Guatemala, I think, was one of the first big coups that E. Howard Hunt and a lot of other people were involved with. Then it went on to Iran. But United Fruit Company was, CIA was basically an asset not for the American people, but for American business interests. And United Fruit Company was one of them. And once they tried not even to be communists, but be socialists and regulate the American capitalism in their own country, that's when they got taken out. So
yeah, well, that's the thing. They use that whole communist scare is they called everybody, and look at the School of Americas. I mean, people. I mean, this is taxpayer funded, and there's been so many fucking terrorists that and assassins and killers and murderers who've come out of that we've trained. Yeah, Noriega. And so I mean, it's amazing, and it's I think it's in Georgia, I believe, right? Isn't it?
I'm not sure if that's not the one at Fort Benning, because a lot of these a lot of the other guys like Louis Posada, Orlando Bosch, all these guys, they trained at Fort Benning, and that's where a lot of the anti-Castro Cubans trained. But I'm not sure exactly where the School of the Americas is, but I know tons of war criminals went there. I think they teach war crime there.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you look at all the things that are known, and this isn't a conspiracy. I mean, you can Wikipedia the School of Americas. I mean, this isn't, it's an open secret. But it seems like there's something about when things are in the past, when things are past tense, we think that we're not doing the same thing today. You're reading it in a history book. Oh, those corrupt guys that are running our government. Oh, that was that corrupt CIA. It's not going on now. And it's just like when you read in a history book, you just assume things are different now. But just like at that time, I had Ray McGovern on, and he worked for the CIA for many years, I think from the 63 to the 90s, and he was a part of doing the presidential daily briefings, and I forget which coup in Central America that we were talking about, but he was saying how he was a part of basically dissecting the most classified CIA information and briefing the president every morning. And even he didn't know about this coup, and he read about it in the newspaper the next day. And he's like, I was in the CIA. He's like, I worked for the CIA.
Well, they have what you have is plausible denial. So and there's different elements of the CIA, and they will say certain people are rogue agents, Frank Turple, Ed Wilson, Thomas Kleins, and they go off and they make deals with Libya, and then they say, hey, they left the CIA, they're not with us. But in reality, you don't really leave the CIA, and that there is a network of arms and guns trading. So even when you have a Louis Posada who leaves the CIA, and then 6 months later he blows up a plane in Cuba, or blows up a Cuban airplane flying from Barbados to Jamaica, and they can say, hey, he's not on our payroll anymore. He left 6 months ago, but he's still part of the same network. And so, and there's almost two CIAs. I think Fletcher probably talks about, there's been a secret team. I kind of get into my book. So the secret team consists of, Bush, Barry Seal, a lot of these Operation 40 guys. And then you might have a CIA regular clerk who might be a good person. I had a friend, I used to stay at his house, and he works for the CIA now. I think he used to DJ at the World Trade Center. So when they blew it up, he got a little pro-American and stuff like that. So he joined the CIA, and he was a hip-hop listening to weed head when I know him. So I think there's definitely different elements of the CIA, and there is a secret element who's involved in most of the terrorism, the assassination, the drug dealing. Then you also have a corporate element who are just bureaucrats and such like that. So there's definitely a multi-layered organization.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the other thing too is that I mean, you just look at history. There's been so many cases of it that when you get in a discussion with somebody and somebody still looks at you like, oh, you're one of those guys, it drives me crazy because history's full of conspiracies. I mean, history. I mean, World War
Caesar.
I. Yeah, I mean, there's been assassinations everywhere. And the crazy thing is when you really look into how many different conflicts world powers have gotten involved in. You know, you look at like Mandela when he passed away. The U.S. did this whole thing like they were so pro Mandela, but I've done a lot of reading about how it was CIA information that.
That's 100% true. Yeah. They passed on the information to the South African government that eventually found him and got him arrested. But actually, that plays a part in my book in that America's support of apartheid is because Henry Kissinger, who's back in the news, I guess because of he's a good friend of Hillary Clinton and Obama. He advises Obama too. Obama kind of missed the bullet. But so Henry Kissinger came to Jamaica and he demanded that Michael Manley withdraw his support. Michael Manley was the prime minister of Jamaica, and he wanted Michael Manley to withdraw his support of the Cuban troops in Angola who were fighting the white South African mercenaries. And the CIA was working very closely with those same white South African mercenaries. So CIA has been very closely tied to apartheid, very closely tied to South African government, especially in Africa when they would utilize a lot of these South African mercenaries to fight their global conquest wars.
Yeah, I read into that Angola CIA link because being Portuguese, I was always curious about some of the stuff that happened after they got their independence and stuff like that. And then when I started finding out that the CIA was involved in that, I mean, it's crazy. They're involved in the Congo.
Well, the good thing about that is John Stockwell, who turned to be a whistleblower, he was the station agent in Angola. So he revealed everything. And that's in my book, too. He talks about all the war crimes, all the forgeries, all the lies they would tell to Congress, what Bush would tell him to do and tell him to say. So he was actually... he was a station agent in charge of the Angola operation, and he told the whole thing. I think they were fighting. It was the UNITA and the MPLA, and they were definitely working very close with these white South African and English mercenaries against because Fidel Castro sent troops there, which kind of heightened the conflict. And now that's what actually led to the CIA's campaign against Jamaica, because once Michael Manley didn't toe the line on that, and he was already a democratic socialist like Bernie Sanders, and he already was friends with Castro. So after that, that's what kind of led to their campaign of propaganda, economic sabotage, political violence, and then also the drug trade and terrorism, etc. So it's and a lot of it plays in today. And like even Jeb Bush played a role in Jamaica. A lot of the Jamaican drug dealers actually had to pay off Jeb Bush. So I was hoping he'd stay in the race so I'd be able to reveal some of the stuff about him. But there was a FBI informant named Darlene Novinger, and she knew some Jamaican drug dealers from before, so she would stay at their house in Jamaica, and they would talk about, hey, we all need to pay Jeb Bush so we could operate freely, and that they brought cocaine to the White House, and they did all these stuff with cocaine and hookers with the Bush kids. And it seems outlandish, but then it's corroborated by stuff that you hear from Chip Tatum, Barry Seal, Terry Reid. So, it's, of course, one person could be lying. It could be crazy. Once you have a pattern of allegations that all kind of reveal the same thing, you have to at least look into it a little more.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you look at, like, the history of the Bushes and the Clintons. I mean, it just...
Oh, yeah. And I don't understand, like, no one's going to ask, because Hillary was involved with Dan Lassiter, too. Hillary's law firm was, basically laundering the cocaine money. And... Again, if Terry Reid's Compromise, Chip Tatum's The Tatum Chronicles, they all kind of definitely paint a picture of Bill Clinton, at the very least, letting the cocaine go by, if not being involved. And, he pardoned Dan Lassiter, and his brother was also, he talks like his brother had a cocaine problem. His brother was not arrested as a cocaine user. They would give away cocaine for free at these parties. Like, it wasn't like... grams. These guys were moving some serious weight, and his brother and his best friend get caught in these cocaine charges, but he pardons them, and that's the thing. When you have a two-party system, the Republicans aren't going to attack Bill Clinton for Mena, Arkansas, because if they do, it's going to come back to the Bush family, and the Democrats aren't going to attack the Bush family for their Mena, Arkansas cocaine, because it's going to come back on the Clinton family. So you have a two-party corrupt system that definitely is not working. They're both scratching each other's back and laughing at the American public.
Yeah, I had Roger Stone on a second time to talk about his most recent book, The Clintons' War on Women, and we did a whole show on Magda, Arkansas, and and a lot of his information. I guess he told me because I referenced the Clinton Chronicles and the Meta Connection.
Yeah, it's a great documentary.
Yeah, two great documentaries, the Meta Connection and Clinton Chronicles. And he's like, he got a lot of information from those two documentaries. And that's the thing, like, people think it sounds crazy, but he talks about Chelsea not being Clinton's daughter.
Hubble, right?
Yeah,
Hubble's,
yeah. Hubble. And actually, I've seen a side-by-side picture. At first, I thought it seemed a little outrageous, but I can actually see the similarities. And nothing seems unreal because just like his Roger Stone on his most recent book, he just came out one about the Bush crime family. I forget what it's called. It's called Jep and a Bush crime family, which kind of sucks because he dropped out. And I think that
I think he knew it. I think he knew like it would come out because Roger Stone is one of Trump's advisors.
Oh yeah. So if that that's the thing. Like he was one of the political consultants when he started, and then they had that thing where there's that debate about did he get fired or did he quit? But at the end of the day, you can see how pro-Trump he is. I mean, he worked for him in the 90s too as a lobbyist for.
He worked for Sharpton too.
Yeah, he worked for Sharpton. Yeah, so he's been around. And the cool thing about having somebody like that, and again, I'm like you. I don't agree with all his politics, and we've had. I remember the first time he was on the show, we got in a little friendly debate about lobbying and this whole idea of he thinks it's freedom of speech, obviously because he was a lobbyist at one time. I think it's not really a fair freedom of speech when the person with the most money has the loudest voice, and so and the cool thing about him, he's such a nice dude, and anytime I've talked to him before the show, after the show, he's been super polite, super nice. I mean, he definitely understands what he has to do to win elections and help people win elections, and he knows how to play the dirty game, and he's been around for a long time. But to have somebody from the inside who was in there and come out and say these things, I mean, he's not a conspiracy theorist. He's not a dude who's
I really don't like the term conspiracy theorist, and that's a term created by the CIA to kind of discredit people who question the Warren Commission. Yeah. Because for me, I'm a historian, I'm a journalist. I don't create theories. If I do have a theory, it's like if I'm a mathematician. If I have a theory that 6x plus 9 is 45, so then I would say, all right, well, I'm not just going to say, hey, it's 7. I'm going to try a number. I'm going to say 6x plus 9 is 45. 9 minus 45 is 36. Oh, x is 6. So I took my theory and then I applied, some type of process to prove the theory, and then it's truth. So that's what I did in my book. And I think I might have even written a lot of people off as quote unquote conspiracy theorists until I actually did the research. A lot of these people who were so quickly to discredit other people don't do any research, and they just believe what the government says.
Well, because like Roger Stone said, if what he was saying was untrue, they would sue the shit out of him. And his publishing company, fact check all this stuff, because if they don't have, some information to back it up, they're not, they're going to get sued and they're going to lose a lot of money. So they're not going to just let him come out and say Chelsea's not Bill Clinton's son publicly and tweet it all the time and put it on Facebook all the time and know that he's saying these things. And yet, if it was untrue, they were just going to let it go. If there's even a slight chance that there's some truth to it, they're not going to get involved in it, because the second the Clintons basically get involved with this this argument with Roger Stone and this whole thing goes public, now more people are going to look into it. And the thing about the Clintons is that they have it's weird, because a lot of people have this very good memory of the Clinton times, that the economy was good and things were good, and so I think like the average person looks at history and they don't realize all these other things that they did, and they kind of just look at, oh yeah, the economy was good, he was a good president, and
the mass incarceration of black men.
Yeah. The WTO, get the World Trade Organization.
Well, NAFTA.
NAFTA. And Hillary with the TPP, she's pushing with the TPP, and so is Obama. That's the thing. All these that's why anytime you talk to somebody and they use the ism and they pick a team and they're, I'm a liberal or I'm a conservative or it's hard to talk to them, because it's like you already picked a team. We're from the Boston area. Well, you're closer to Boston. I am. In Massachusetts, but you get somebody who's a Giants fan, and they're never going to tell you Tom Brady's a good good quarterback because that's not his team. So it's like it's pointless having this conversation. So that's the thing, and that's the cool thing about my show is like I try to have people on from all sides because I could care less. You know, I talked about James Perloff briefly, and he's a Christian. James Corbett's on all the time.
I like James Corbett a lot.
Oh, James Corbett's one of the best researchers. It was funny because
him Mae Brussel, like he did a tribute show to Mae Brussel, and she was an amazing researcher too. And like I was talking about Dave Emery and Nip Tuck, all those guys are. I've learned so much from just listening to their podcasts or old radio shows and stuff like that. But yeah, I think I'm interested in people who tell the truth. I don't care if they're Republicans, Libertarians, Communists, Socialists, Muslims, Christians.
Well, I think that's where we all come together, because I think if we're all just, for example, even Roger Stone, I don't agree with him politically, but because he's exposing corruption and we're all fans of humanity, we're all fans of peace and trying to make the world a better place, we can all come together in this one cause of trying to expose corrupt criminals and that's where we all come together, and that's where all these other differences aren't that important. I had Mariana Van Zeller on, who she's done OxyContin Express, and she was also on the Travel Channel. She had that show Breaking Borders, where she would go to like Palestine, and she would get Jewish people and Muslims and get them to sit together, and she had a world famous chef with them, and she would try to get them to talk over food, because that's the one thing that brings I think all of us together. And the amazing thing is, like I was talking to her, I'm like, the one thing we all have in common, no matter where you go, is we all want a safe environment to live. We all want, good schools and good neighborhoods for kids to play in and grow up in. And, we all want safety, and we all want basically a lot of the same things. And then it's all these other things that get in the way, and it's all, you put a black kid next to a white baby when they're little, if they're a 1-year-old, guess what? They don't give a shit what their skin color is. They don't care what they're
playing.
Yeah, they're
another baby.
Yeah, exactly. They don't care if you're a Muslim. They don't care if whatever religion you are. It's like as you grow, all those other things are just used to separate us. And we have to come to terms at the fact that if I see somebody get hit by a car, my first reaction is go and help them. It's not like, oh, I know that guy's a conservative, fuck him. It's like it's your first reaction, and then it's the other stuff that just So we have to look at the fact that I think we all do care about the same things, and we're all willing to help each other, and all these other things are just created. I mean, it's just like socialism. You get people who immediately will say, oh, socialism, oh, he's a socialist. Well, do you like getting your mail? Because that's a socialist idea. I'm like,
roads.
Yeah, roads. I'm like, do you like police? Because guess
Firemen.
what? I mean, anything that your taxpayer money, any service that your taxpayer money goes to giving you, if you like unemployment when you get laid off, do you like? I'm like, guess what? Those are all socialist ideas. So there's no one answer. The capitalists, and then people would say, well, look at socialism. It didn't work in Venezuela. It didn't work in Western Europe. In Spain or wherever. And but capitalism didn't work either, No,
and especially for a lot of third world countries, and I think a lot of the reasons socialism hasn't worked in countries like Jamaica is because you had the CIA and American interests trying to take it down and discredit it, and using all sorts of dirty tactics like assassinations, drug dealing, terrorism, economic sabotage, propaganda to kind of take out socialism. And because it doesn't fit their economic agenda. It's a lot easier to deal with a dictator than it is to deal with a socialist government. It's a lot easier to deal with one company that owns the oil than it is, or a country owns the oil or whatever natural resources that happen to be there. Or it's a lot easier to exploit a country when there's no minimum wage than it is to exploit a country when there is a minimum wage for labor. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So how did you get involved? I'm guessing you're Jamaican, and that's what got
my father's Jamaican. My mother's from South Africa, and
and that's what got you intrigued with their history. What you just wanted to know more about?
Well, I was always I would see like the graffiti. There'd be PMP and JLP graffiti everywhere I would go. And when I was young, I was going to Jamaica. I was like 4 or 5, and this was at the height of one of the most violent elections they had. But I wouldn't know, because my family lived in a nice suburb of Kingston. But I would see this graffiti, and I would still drive around these areas. And then later, I would get into Bob Marley. And first I loved his music. Then I started reading books about him. So I read a book. Timothy White wrote a brilliant biography called "Catch a Fire," and in it he would, talk about the political violence. And as I tried to find like the reason behind a lot of Bob Marley songs, I would find more about the history of Jamaica. And then I took a tour of Bob Marley's house, which is now a museum. And the tour guide brought me around to a rehearsal area, and she showed me some bullet holes, and she said, "This is where Bob Marley was shot, and the CIA set him up to get shot." And I was like, "Whoa, why did That kind of blew my mind a little bit. And then I read a book by Don Taylor, who was Bob Marley's manager, and in the book he said that a couple years after there was an attempted assassination attempt on Bob Marley, where he was shot, Don Taylor was shot, his wife was shot in the head. And he said they strung up some of the people who were involved in the shooting, and the people who were there while they were being interrogated, they admitted that the CIA paid them in guns and cocaine to try and kill Marley. So I was intrigued from then, and then I would read books like Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, and he referred to a lot of stuff in Jamaica, so it's kind of set the pattern for what was going on in Nicaragua. And then when I went to Columbia University, I did a big paper on Jamaica in the 70s and Bob Marley and the Cold War. It was called the Bear, the Eagle, and the Lion. The bear being communism, the eagle being capitalism, and the lion being Bob Marley. And so after, I think in 2008, I started working as a journalist for an organization called News One. And then 2 years into my job, there was a big, massive manhunt for a guy named Dudis, who was actually... his name was Christopher Koch. His father was Lester Lloyd Koch, also known as Jim Brown, and he was a notorious Jamaican gangster and was part of the Shower Posse and was involved in the 70s. So when that happened, I remembered the history, and I knew about... There was also an American Gangster documentary where they talked about how like the CIA was kind of involved in starting the Shower Posse. So I did a big article called How the CIA Created the Jamaican Shower Posse. And it went pretty viral. A lot of people expressed interest. And so I was trying to turn it into a TV show possibly, but actually another great writer named Marlon James, he wrote a fictionalized version of a lot of the stuff that's in my book called A Brief History of Seven Killings, and it's been optioned to HBO. So it will be. But his fiction, like when I was reading it, I was like, wow, this is like the truth. He just changed names. Like, he did a really good job with the book. So, and then what was really great for me is that through the WikiLeaks cables, all the embassy cables from the period I was focusing on, 76. So I have a record of every day of every character, and this is coming from their own American embassy. So you had all sorts of characters. Like you had a massive state of emergency. You had Michael Manley had a spy he used. Michael Manley was the progressive Democratic Socialist prime minister from the People's Nationalist Party, and the CIA in America supported Edward Seaga, who was a pro-capitalist, pro-American person who more fit their agenda. And Michael Manley was a very crafty person. He had spies infiltrating the CIA. He had his own double agents. He had agents in Miami. So he was kept aware of a lot of the plots against him. So it was kind of amazing that he wound up actually winning the election and deterring the CIA from doing what they normally do, either either a coup, an election victory, or an assassination to kind of take power. So yeah, it was my heritage and also my interest in Bob Marley and my interest in Jamaica that led me to writing the book.
I heard some people say how Jamaica actually were like the first one or the last ones to kind of consider Bob Marley a freedom fighter. Like they weren't, like he got popular in other places before Jamaica.
Yeah, that's true.
Is that true?
A little bit true. I mean, like right now, he's a big draw for tourists and stuff. But there was a while people would actually look down on Rastafarians, and it's kind of like happens at anywhere. Like you might have your own band in Springfield, and then it's not till you go to England and they like you there that you come back and they're like, yeah, he's great. Yeah. So it was like he went to England, toured there, toured Europe, toured America, and once Jamaicans saw the world loved him, they really started adoring him. But he always had a lot of support from the inner city, and he was close to members of both political parties, the PNP, which was Michael Manley's party, and the JLP, and he actually was close to some of the gangsters. So he was always kind of a inner city hero. But for like the middle class and a lot of people in Jamaica to finally accept him, it took him to get international, first world success. Because like I said, there's a lot of stigmatism against both poor people and Rastafarians, which he was both. Again, so that kind of held him back. So, it's a bit of both. Like he always had a groundswell support in Jamaica, but he didn't really become the icon he is today until he got like a worldwide acknowledgement.
Yeah, that makes sense, because that is true. Sometimes you hear comedians or musicians talk about how, their hometown doesn't support them as much as they expect them to, and then they get popular other places, then everybody else jumps on board. So that kind of makes sense. So he ended up dying by natural.
I don't have in my book, because again, I try and stay away from theories I can't prove, so I didn't write about it in my book. But there is, I think Alex Constantine wrote an article for High Times magazine, and I couldn't find too much to corroborate that Carl Colby, who's William Colby's son, gave him a pair of boots with poisonous wire that gave him cancer. And I know there have been like certain biological.
Well, Jack Ruby. I mean,
Jack Ruby. Yes, definitely Jack Ruby in jail.
Example.
And a lot.
I mean,
what happened to Hugo Chavez? So, I mean, it's enough to raise suspicion, but it wasn't enough for me to write about it, because again, I don't want to put theories out there. I just want to put facts, evidence, and everything like that. So there are a lot of allegations that they're involved with his death as well, which I don't really get into, but I definitely get into his assassination attempt, because even Don Taylor, not only did he have that evidence from being at the actual, the kangaroo court, or whatever you want to call it, he also said that Michael Manley told him that the CIA was involved in the plot with the JLP. And Timothy White, who's an incredible journalist, he said he spoke to several law enforcement people on the PNP, people on the JLP, and that he came to the conclusion that it was Jim Brown, Lester Lloyd, Jim Brown Koch, who was the Edward Seaga's bodyguard and went on to become the leader of the Shower Posse, and that he led the charge, and that it was the CIA who kind of gave the order, and they worked with the JLP to do it. And I have a very confidential source that I can't really give up, that was close to Marley, that also corroborates that it was Jim Brown. And a number of Jim Brown's colleagues, like this guy Cecil Connor, he actually wound up testifying against Jim Brown. And then he joined the Witness Protection Program. And after doing that, he went back to becoming a gangster. He went back to St. Kitts, which was his native island, which is a very small Caribbean island. But he would wind up giving interviews to Newsweek and the New York Times saying the CIA trained me, they taught me how to kill, they bust me out of jail, they told me how to kill with the watch, they did all this for me so I would take down Michael Manley. And there was another colleague of his called Richard Storyteller Morrison, who didn't say anything, but a cellmate of his said that the CIA did everything but actually moved the cocaine for him in the 80s for Grenada. So there's a lot of connections between the Shower Posse, or the armed drug dealing wing of the Jamaica Labour Party, that, according to several sources, was responsible for Bob Marley's shooting, that are also very closely tied to the CIA.
Yeah, well, there's always been a mystery with Bob Marley, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, John Lennon. I mean, it seems like anybody who's, putting out this message or provoking thought and getting people.
Yeah, Robert Kennedy too.
Yeah, Robert Kennedy. Sirhan still doesn't know what he did or doesn't.
Yeah, no, that's the weeks of MK Ultra, and I think one of the guys, Morales, there was definitely all these anti-Castro Cubans are around all these events. Like the doorman who was working for John Lennon's thing was one of those Bay of Pigs, Brigade 256 anti-Castro Cubans. There was a couple of those anti-Castro Cubans at Robert Kennedy's assassination, and this is kind of how I got into the JFK assassination. Was when I was doing the research. There were these two terrorists, Louis Passad and Orlando Bosch, and I think Ellen Ray for Counter Spy magazine. And also I think there was John Cummings and Ernest Volkman wrote an article for Penthouse magazine about the CIA in Jamaica, and it's because of such people probably laugh, Penthouse is known mostly as like a dirty smut magazine, but
they say Playboy also has written some good articles in great
articles. Both of those places. Penthouse actually had a lot, because I think the mainstream media doesn't like writing about the CIA, and if you do write about the CIA and you're like a Gary Webb type, you're going to be ostracized and attacked, whether it be the JFK assassination, whether it be Iran-Contra cocaine, whether it be Watergate. You can only go so far in terms of writing about the CIA. But Penthouse, and even Hustler, even Larry Flint did a lot of good work in terms of documenting what happened to the CIA. But both of these guys had a big expose on the CIA in Jamaica, and they actually said that Louis Posada Carrillas, who is a notorious terrorist, assassin, drug dealer, connected to Felix Rodriguez. So I found out about him, and then his buddy is Orlando Bosch, who's another great terrorist. Like I spoke about earlier, both these guys were responsible for a Cuban plane being blown up. This is one of the first examples of airline terrorism, which has become a big thing after. And 73 innocent people were killed, the Cuban fencing team. And originally they wanted to bomb it in Jamaica. The same plane had a bomb in Jamaica, but because it was late, 40 minutes late, it just blew off in the luggage and no one died. But 4 months after that, they got the same plane and it killed 73 people. So when I started interviewing doing research on Louis Posada, I saw that, Chauncey Holt said he was around at the JFK assassination. Marita Lorenz would say that Orlando Bosch and a lot of other of their anti-Castro Cuban cohorts were in the room with Howard Hunt when he was passing out money when they were on their way to Dallas. And then she later said, she found out that it was Frank Sturgis. She told Frank Sturgis, or she heard from Frank Sturgis that they killed Kennedy. So these guys have been traced back to the JFK assassination. And then you had all the anti-Castro Cubans, Bad Pigs guys in Watergate. Then a lot of them researched in Iran-Contra, like Louis Posada. The CIA bust Louis Posada out of jail, where he was in jail for killing the 73 civilians in Venezuela. But he was busted out of jail by Felix Rodriguez, and then he wound up working in El Salvador with Felix Rodriguez, training. He plays a big role, if you read Terry Reid's Compromise. He plays a big role in training a lot of the Contras, and also in the kind of the cocaine gun supply chain, which went through Miami, Mena, Arkansas, all sorts of other places. So it's a really very crazy tangled web of terrorists, spies, drug dealers, politicians.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's there's so many names, but the weird thing, like you said, is the fact that a lot of these names keep resurfacing.
Exactly.
You hear about them in Watergate. You hear about them in the JFK assassination, in the Bay of Pigs. I mean, it's just a lot of the same names, and that's the thing people have to realize is that a lot of what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, the president has very little control. I know there's a lot of people who were Obama fans, and I was one that I thought that he might.
Me too.
I mean, I was young. I think I was still in very much the beginnings of understanding how the world really worked, but I think a lot of it also had to do with the fact that I disliked Bush so much that I think it blinded me enough to make me think that this guy is so dramatically different than the last president that things are going to be different. And then you realize, the way he's treated whistleblowers has been outrageous. You look at, just charging people with the Espionage Act, and John Kiriakou, who worked for the CIA. I mean, he's ruined his life. He's ruined, Thomas Drake's life. They just, it goes on and on and on the list. And obviously the drone attacks, pushing for the TPP, all these things, and not closing Gitmo, even though he said he was going to. And that's why, even though, I think our best option right now probably is Bernie Sanders. And I know people are upset about, free college. It's like, how crazy would it be is that if that my generation or our generation would be the first parents in, who knows how many years that we don't have to think about, saving money for college. Like, that's
so
fucking
expensive.
Yeah, and it's a racket. We all agree it's a racket.
Racket.
We agree that that it's the tuition keeps going up, and college or the government keeps giving out loans so that the colleges keep getting their money, so they never have any incentive to lower tuition. That debt that you owe is with you forever. It doesn't matter if you file for bankruptcy or whatever. A lot of times you go to school for one thing, they say it's in high demand. By the time you're done, it's not in high demand anymore. And then you're a lot, and I forget what the percentage of kids who are doing jobs that have nothing to do with their degree is, but it's some ridiculous number where, so you're in debt, you're in the hole. It's like you're almost better off going to getting a job right out of high school and just start making money, and at least you can start buying stuff and you can start saving money. I mean, it's a racket. So this idea that, and the thing is, we don't have a income problem, we have a spending problem. So we could, we could pay for college the same if we cut corners somewhere else. These
totally unnecessary wars, which aren't keeping us safer at all. They're hurting us. They're
creating
making
terrorists.
The world, and they're killing all sorts of innocent people overseas. And these,
proxy wars.
College tuition would be 0.5% of what we put into these wars, which are totally unnecessary. And they serve the military-industrial complex. They serve, the oil companies. They serve a lot of these multinational corporations, but they're not helping us at all.
I heard.
I think one of the reasons the oil prices are so low right now is because they're just trying to sabotage Venezuela. Because these the Arabic companies they could
and
lower
Russia.
the oil prices for a while and still get by, but Venezuela's really struggling. So I think that's one of the reasons the oil prices are so low right now. I think they'll go up dramatically after we take over Venezuela and get a pro-capitalist president there. And there's a total lock on the market.
I think it also has a lot to do with Russia, because Russia's economy is not as stable as these other OPEC countries, and they know that they can lower prices, they can afford to do it, and Russia will make it a little harder for Russia, and they, it's a little, and that's what it is. It's just a chess match. When I had Ray McGovern on, we briefly talked about it. And he tends to believe too that that's why the oil prices are low, is because they're in cahoots to try to make a kind of unstable countries like Venezuela and Russia more unstable, and because they know those are big exports of theirs. So it's crazy, because the thing is that nobody ever asks the question, like, why the fuck why did gas just become $1 or $2 a gallon? Out of nowhere.
I remember that being like in the 80s.
Yeah.
The last time I remember.
But the thing is, nobody asks
$1.50.
Why? Why? Like, people just are like, okay.
It's a finite resource. It's not. It's going to run out eventually. It's not like water or sunshine or.
Well, I'm not even sure. Do you believe that? Because I'm not even sure that I completely believe that it's going to run out. Because the thing is, I've thought that for the longest time. I believed in peak oil, but the way that if the Earth made it at some point, then. Why would we assume that it stopped making it?
It's fossil fuels. It's old dinosaurs. Once these old dinosaurs and old living creatures.
Yeah, but well, that's what they say, but I'm not sure that's 100%. Well, either way, I'm not. Well, I have a buddy who's an engineer who comes on the show sometimes, and we've had he has his opinions on that, and he's kind of made me kind of question that too. And James Corbett's another one who has questioned climate change and stuff like that, and it's important for at least for me personally. Like, anytime I have established opinion, I like to hear other perspectives, because I know I could possibly be wrong. And
right, and as I won't say I'm a scientist or anything. There's scientists I respect, and sometimes I take their words for it. And
well, we all do.
I try and use my common sense. Yeah. And you're going to have scientists. I think it's who's paying you. So if an oil company is paying a scientist, he's going to say, hey, no, there's no climate change. Just like if you have a cigarette company paying a scientist, he's going to say, hey, no, cigarettes don't do any damage to your body. It's okay.
You ever watch that documentary?
You don't want to tell the person you're paying them, who's paying you, something they don't want to hear, because then they're going to go pay someone else who's going to tell them what they want to hear.
You ever hear that or hear of the documentary Merchants of Doubt? It's a really good documentary about how a lot of the same scientists or supposed scientists that were telling you that cigarettes are good for you and aren't harmful are the same people who are saying that climate change isn't man-made. So, I mean, obviously, again, there's corruption everywhere. I can see the perspective of oil companies have incentive into convincing people that it's not man-made, or at least it has no effect on the environment, which I tend to again, I tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, if I lock myself in the garage and keep my car running, I'm like, I die. I'm like, guess what? That shit's in the air. So I'm like, you can't tell me it's not harmful. It's not having any effect. We understand through the history of the world that there's always been, we've had an ice age, we've had temperatures have changed, climates has changed throughout the history of the world. We know that places have gotten hot, places have gotten cold. So to look at the world and say that there's this giant temperature change, it couldn't absolutely be naturally causing, and it would have been naturally causing even if we weren't here. But to say that we're not having any effect on the environment is just ridiculous. I think
right. If you smoke cigarettes, it's going to have an effect on your lungs. If you smoke in your room, it's going to have an effect on the paint.
Yeah, and it's
cause and effect.
Yeah, and it's proven that people who live in cities, because of brake dust, because of exhaust fumes, they don't live as long, and so that stuff is going out in the air. That is having some effect. Now, do we know for sure that it's the reason why ice is melting and all this? I mean, I don't know if there's there's no proof that it's definitely only man caused. So I think that it's a combination of the two. I think it's a combination of environment changing and probably, but to think that all the fracking, all the, I mean, just drive by a factory and just see this, 24 hours a day.
Smell.
It smells, and 24 hours a day there's smoke just going in the air. And just thinking that has no effect on the environment, I mean, that's just insane. I mean, and U.S. is mild. Look at China. Look at,
Right.
So it's
China has such a big population, then they're not as bad as us percentage wise, but because they have 4 or 5 times our population, that if they do even half of what we do in terms of driving, smoking, eating beef,
plus they're short, so they can't reach the smoke, so they're safe.
But not Yao Ming though.
But it's crazy. So there is two sides, and again, I'm like you. I mean, I end up hearing somebody like a James Corbett, who is a friend of mine, been on the show a bunch of times, and I love his work. And if he disagrees with something I'm saying, then I automatically will second guess what I'm thinking, because you end up finding somebody who's credible, and then if they say something like you said, you'll be like, what, I like this person, he's credible, I'm gonna go with his opinion. But even sometimes they're wrong. So,
but I try and research it yourself and come to your own conclusions and find out who the respectable people are in that field, and who aren't being paid off. People who do it, what I like about James Corbett is he obviously, he's no corporations are paying him to do what he wants to do. He's doing his research independently. So that doesn't mean that everything he's going to say is right. He's probably right about 95, 99% of stuff. I like to think if I hit that rate, I think I'm good. I'm doing good. If I'm in the 95 percentile of everything I'm saying being right, I'm sure somewhere along the way, like I might have a bit of false information here, jump to a wrong conclusion here. That happens, but if you hit that 95%, you're doing all right. Because there's so much that people can hide from you. So.
Oh, absolutely, and that's the thing. Like, I hate when people jump down somebody's throat because they were wrong on something. It's like we're all capable of it. We're all capable of saying, "Hey, I looked up this information. It led me to this conclusion," and then it's quite possible that later in time I might find out that there's better information or information that I didn't see. I mean, there's just so much information out there, you can't possibly dissect it all. So I mean, it's amazing. And James Corbett's awesome because he does have references to all his work.
He's great. Yeah, exactly. And this is why again I like him in terms of, rather than anyone watching like Alex Jones or anyone's transcripts, because anyone could say something outlandish, but he actually has his transcripts and links to the sources in the transcripts, which is.
I think that's why James Corbett's really getting popular. It's funny because I've had. Do you listen to Joe Rogan podcast?
I've listened to a few. He just has I try and find the ones I'd be interested in, but I'm not an MMA guy. And he seems to have, when I look at his stuff, like most stuff is MMA, but I know he has like Immortal Technique and a lot of good people involved in politics.
And he's had comedians on. He's had Graham Hancock on. Dennis McKenna, who's just on my podcast, who's Terrence McKenna's brother. He's had a lot of Adam Scorgi, who did The Culture High, who's also been on my show, which was a great documentary about the war on drugs. And he's also well known for his the union, the business behind getting high, and the whole history of the propaganda with marijuana. And so he definitely has it. Definitely, I think what makes him special is the fact that he takes in people who aren't into MMA but are into comedy, and then they'll come in and be exposed to. So, and then he'll take people who are into MMA, might not be into this other stuff, and then expose them to other stuff. So it's because he gets so many different types of group of people, and that's what I try to do with this show. That's why I have authors on, I have filmmakers, but then I've had Ian Bagg, who was on Last Comic Standing.
Oh, nice. Because I think a lot of time with a lot of these, I would say. I don't like the term alternative history because there's just one history, and then there's propaganda. I don't like the term conspiracy theory because these aren't theories, but people, I think, among the community of people who realize what the CIA has been doing and realize, I think a lot of times people might just be like kind of preaching to the choir, because you're getting people who already kind of know, like they already know the CIA has been doing all this dirt, they've involved in drug trafficking, assassinations. So you're help furthering their mind, but in order for a real change in this country, in this world, you're going to need to reach out to the people who would normally just believe what the government would say. And, I got to go, because, I do music, too, so I'll send you some of the music I've done, because I do music about this. I think music's a good way. I think Bob Marley did a great job.
Yeah, I do music, too. I do. Actually, if you want to send me something, I'll throw something at the end of this show if you want to.
All right, cool.
If it's okay with you, yeah, I'll definitely, because all my intro music and outro music's all my own stuff. That's actually how this started. The Ripple Effect was named after one of my songs, and then
nice.
Yeah, and then and that's how I'm like, dude, I already have microphones and headphones and a mixer.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah,
so I'm like, why not jump into it? And that dude, why didn't you start one? You already probably.
That's, people said that after I was on the Opperman Report. I definitely would like to get into it. Because again, I'm interested in stuff like sports and comedy and TV but as well as politics. So I think that thanks.
Yeah,
take credit if I do.
yeah, because to bring up James Corbett, I had Eddie Bravo on, who's one of Joe Rogan's best friends, gave him his black belt, and I don't know if you know Eddie Bravo, but he's also a musician. He plays, he has a music project called Smoke Serpent, and he used to be in like a 80s metal band, and he's also a huge 10th Planet guy. His school's 10th Planet. He's very well known for beating one of the Gracies in this tournament when he was only a purple belt, and so, but he's also huge in conspiracies. So I did a whole show with him on, we talked about music, we talked about MMA, and we talked about a lot of history stuff, because he's intrigued with the same things. I'm intrigued with, like JFK, 9/11, a lot of this stuff. But he follows me on Twitter, and I'm always telling him about James Corbett's work. And just on last Sunday on the Joe Rogan podcast, he's like, Joe, you got to watch this documentary. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. I watched it a bunch of times. He's like, it's How Big Oil Conquered the World by James Corbett. And,
wow, yeah.
Yeah, so that's awesome. And I emailed James Corbett, and I told him, like, listen, I'm like, this is huge. I'm like, you got on a really big platform and a lot of listeners who probably aren't necessarily listeners of yours. So, I mean, a lot of people who might not be familiar with your work got exposed to your stuff, and I told him, like, I don't know if it was because of me tweeting it or whatever, because he follows me, or him being on my show and mentioning you, but I'm like, I'm taking credit until I hear otherwise. but that's awesome, because James Corbett, and that's what I like, because to expose people to somebody like him, because like you said, you have to get the people who aren't familiar with this stuff, because there's more of them than us, and to capture them, he's a perfect spokesperson, because he's well referenced. He doesn't talk about crazy, silly stuff. He doesn't connect dots that aren't there.
Yeah, I'm with Alex Jones. Yeah, there's a lot of truth in with Alex Jones. Alex
absolutely.
Jones has done a great job exposing JFK assassination. Great job exposing CIA drug trafficking.
He was at Waco. I mean, this guy was at Waco during the whole siege. I mean, he's been around and fighting for truth for a long time. But like you said, his problem is that he goes too far sometimes, and then
which discredits the truth he says.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge issue, is that you start connecting dots and you start saying things that there's no real evidence for. People are eventually going to stop listening.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no.
Turn this off.
No problem.
Sorry about that. And I mean, I think because he gets so excited and riled up, and then he's mixing a little bit of religion and the Trump stuff and Farrakhan. I'm not fans of either of those people. And then he starts talking about abortion and issues like that. I think
he's still conservative. Yeah, he's
still conservative, but he's anti-Bush. So
yeah, well, that's the thing.
He's been calling out the Bush family for years. I got to give credit
absolutely.
For that.
Yeah, I give him a lot of credit, because even though he has these and same thing with Ron Paul. I was a huge fan of Ron Paul. I don't believe in his religious beliefs. I
actually started off with I started this was before I learned about the Alliance Conspiracy, but Ron Paul connections to I wrote a lot of stuff about it. I can send you it's not just the racist newsletters. He's had a lot of connections to a lot of these white supremacists, and I think honestly some of the things, like he has connections to this guy Willis Cato and a magazine called The Spotlight, and being my father is Jamaican, African American, I have a lot of people. I have a very low tolerance for white supremacy, or people who can donate spread it like he did. But if you look at The Spotlight, it was The Spotlight who actually first exposed E. Howard Hunt for his involvement in the JFK assassination, and that's when that Mark Lane defended The Spotlight against E. Howard Hunt, who sued him for libel. Because they said they released a document which placed E. Howard Hunt in Dallas and from stuff like that. And they were one of the first organizations to kind of call out the CIA and E. Howard Hunt directly for being involved, and Dick Gregory, which is interesting. The white supremacist and Dick Gregory both calling out E. Howard Hunt for his involvement. But even with that, hopefully he's made some changes. He has made some valid points about the drug war, which is, you can have a white supremacist who might spread this stuff because the newsletters were vile. He was, and they took the picture with Don Black because took all that Stormfront money. And I think Anonymous even leaked some of the emails between I forget the name of one. There was this one prominent white supremacist supporter, like David Duke's old assistant, and he would always talk about, hey, I'm meeting with Ron and Rand Paul, blah blah blah. And then recently Rand Paul just had to fire his one of his staff because he was the Confederate Avenger. And then there's a video of Ron Paul speaking in front of a Confederate flag, which as a lot of people I know are very offended by the flag, and people bring it up to me all the time too. But the American flag is bad too, and then said yeah. But it's I think the Confederate flag kind of stands for racism in a lot of people's minds. The American flag stands for freedom in a lot of people's minds, which is wrong because so much injustice has been done under the flag. So no, and I really wish you could have like a merger of the where people like the Ron and Rand Pauls and Bernie Sanders who agree on a lot of social issues and might disagree on the economic issues, but Ron Paul and has been calling out the New World Order, 9/11 stuff and something like this, and he's called out. He was one of the first person to call out Bush for his drug trafficking. So I wish we could get rid of the racism. Let's get rid of that because that's a bad philosophy. And then we can have an honest discussion between libertarianism and socialism, but get rid of these evil corporate people who just believe in murder and believe that, their way by any means necessary, whether it be drug dealing, terrorism, assassinations, lying, etc., to get their way. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing about Ron Paul. I have read a little bit about his links to that, and it sucks because he really, he has done a lot of good with, calling out the Fed, talking about foreign policy and the fact that we shouldn't be involved in the Middle East.
Yeah, definitely.
And
drug war.
Yeah, the drug war.
Lou Rockwell too, who they said actually wrote his stuff. Lou Rockwell's
worked with.
I get a lot of good information. Lou Rockwell sourced me a few times on some articles.
Oh, really?
So
nice.
Yeah. So some articles I wrote. I think it was actually one of the old CIA Jamaica stuff. So I just wish, they could just come clean, like, hey, we're sorry, we were racist, we didn't know, like, let's all work together, like, black people aren't bad, they're not the enemy. We know who the enemy is, it's the neocons, the 1%, the Bush crime family, etc. So, and then, team up with Sanders, and then, hey, and then if we need to have a debate on the floor, say, hey, we think libertarianism works, we want less government, we actually want socialism and more government, we want to take care of the poor, or we just want a laissez-faire thing, let's discuss that. But let's get rid of our wars. Let's get rid of our drug war. And let's expose these war criminals who've been lying to our country and assassinating our leaders and dealing drugs abroad to poison our communities now. I know. I'm sure in Massachusetts you see the heroin epidemic, which is crazy right now, and it's Afghanistan. And this is one of the first time the drug epidemics wasn't really black people being the hardest hit, because when you had the Vietnam War, and again, CIA drug dealing. You had Ted Shackley, Dick Armitage dealing with Kun Saw and General Vang Pao. And these guys were shipping in heroin, shipping in heroin from Southeast Asia to the States. We got drug dealers like Frank Lucas, Frank Matthews, big-time black drug dealers were getting their heroin from the CIA, destroying black neighborhoods. So that was when the America's main goal was Southeast Asia, not only Vietnam, but it was also Laos, Cambodia, Thailand to an extent. And then when you had what Gary Webb wrote about, and this also goes in my book too, like Gary Webb did a very good job pointing out how on the West Coast, a lot of the CIA sponsored cocaine was at the heart of the crack epidemic. Yeah. But if you look at my book, on the East Coast, these Jamaican gangs who were also sponsored by the CIA, I think there was reports in the New York Times that they were controlling like 40% of the crack market. So if you had all the West Coast cocaine crack epidemic coming from the Nicaraguans, and then you had the East Coast crack cocaine coming from the CIA-supported Jamaicans, it's really, and they were saying Oliver North was setting the price for cocaine. I think it was Al Miller who said that. He said they controlled so much of the cocaine market. Oliver North could say, 15 a key. And then everyone have to follow them because they had controlling a majority of the market. Almost like oil. Like, OPEC can control how much oil is because they control so much about it. These guys were controlling cocaine so much they could set the price. But what now is going on through Afghanistan, and also I think you have a problem through the pharmaceutical industry, getting people hooked on opiates, and then I think there's been some changes to opiate laws. But now there's a new easy pipeline, and this for the first time it isn't black inner city people. It's white working class people in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Kentucky, and you have a major heroin epidemic, and it's affecting my friends. I've known people who died, and it's a real shame what's going on. It's definitely the CIA too, and I think when I was reading some of Hillary Clinton's emails, some of them involved Hamid Karzai's brother, Wali. I don't think I could pronounce it right, but he was also a big-time heroin kingpin, and he was also on the payroll of the CIA. So I'd be interested in seeing what she's talking about when she's talking about this brother who was assassinated, I think in maybe 2010, and what the CIA's role with him was, and what her connection with him was, because she wrote a letter to Karzai, and I read it. It was just very, apologetic letter. Sorry about the death of your brother, the big time heroin kingpin and CIA asset. She didn't put that in. But so I'd wonder what the connection would be between Hillary Clinton and this, because and even if you look at what happened in Benghazi, that was a total CIA
that was
gun running.
Yeah.
Yes. And
they're using the embassy to run guns, and that's why they went back and forth with it. That's why these films like 13 Hours and Argo and all that stuff. It's like,
I love them.
Yeah,
they're so fake.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I just got in an argument with my brother the other day. He was talking about how great of a film it was. I'm like, yeah, but I won't watch American Sniper. I won't watch 13 Hours.
I love them. I love them. They're like Star Wars to me. They're totally fake.
Well, that's the thing. I'm like, he's like, oh, well, they're trying to make it not political. I'm like, well, how do you do a whole film?
Oh no, they're total propaganda.
Yeah, I'm like, how do you? And I've had Sean Stone on, Oliver Stone's son, and who did JFK.
Yeah, I like
Sean's awesome.
Stardust. What's his podcast?
Who?
Oliver Stone's son. He has a good podcast too.
He has a show called Enter the Buzzsaw.
Sawdust.
Yeah, and then he also has a show. Well, actually, that makes sense. Sawdust. I'm like, where did you get Sawdust? But that actually makes sense. and then he's on Watching the Hawks with Tyrell Ventura and who's the son of Jesse Ventura.
Jesse's done a great job too.
Yeah, Jesse's been on my show.
A lot of these conspiracies.
Yeah, Jesse's been on, and his son's been on.
Nice.
Yeah, and they've been
good company.
Yeah, definitely. And Rick Ross, that we've talked a lot about.
I've talked with Freeway Rick Ross.
Yeah, Freeway. Yeah, he's been on, and Abraham Bolden's been on. I don't know if you know him. He was the first black Secret Service agent on a presidential.
For JFK, for RFK or JFK.
JFK. Yeah,
JFK. Yep.
And he was a whistleblower who got locked up and stuff like that. He's an amazing dude because he's like early 80s and he still has just an amazing storytelling ability, and to know what he's been through, and like him talking about like the times that he grew up in. We forget, like, it wasn't that long ago that he was talking about how secret agents or Secret Service was talking about how if JFK got shot, they wouldn't care because him in the civil rights movement and him liking the black community and all that stuff, they wouldn't and how racist they were. And it's like, it's crazy that, like, it wasn't that long ago that was the norm, and
I think even Frank Sturgis said when he was talking to Marie Lorenz that was one of the issues that they kind of had with him, and which kind of led to assassination, was his support for civil rights, which is interesting because LBJ wound up signing a lot of stuff. But I think even a lot of stuff what LBJ did, that now you kind of got rid of de facto segregation, but through a lot of the economic policies, you still had de jure segregation, and then you still had so many black people shipped off to Vietnam, and so many people getting hooked on drugs, that you've had such a economic impact that the actual laws didn't have the impact that you would want them to have.
Oh, so, yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. You ever watch that the documentary I sent you, Mafa 21?
No, I didn't start it. I'm gonna start it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and it goes. I mean, it goes to the history of eugenics, and then Margaret Sanger, and how she was basically a racist who started
I've heard that in terms of Sanger, and I've gotten into some arguments. I think she gave Martin Luther King an award, and I think she gave like I think the big quote she had of "we could" is kind of taken a little bit out of context, And I have a lot of like some arguments with my pro-black friends about abortion, and it's actually who abortion is really affecting is professional white people who are having less kids, and women are having careers and stuff like that. It's happening in Europe too. It's happening in Japan.
Well, historically, I tell people all the time, historically, people, I mean, I was born in a small farm in Portugal. My dad's one of 12, my mom's one of 7. We were basically poor. We didn't have running water at our house or anything. And it's very typical that poor families had big families because of the fact that you're not so career oriented. You're not going to work, 80 hours a week and worried about getting promoted and getting overtime. So it's this whole idea of like, the ones who can't afford having kids are the ones having it. Well, that's historically, it's always been like that because people who are busy and are career oriented don't have time to have kids or take care of them. So they, maybe they don't have any, maybe they only have a couple. So, I mean, it's quite normal that, and that's the thing. If you want to fix the problem, you fix the problem by helping them get off their feet, get good jobs, get education, because guess what? Once they have a career and they have a path towards a good paying job, they're not going to be bored at home. I mean, it's like my dad. He used to joke around. I'm like, how the fuck did you guys have so many kids? And he's like, oh, well, you have to remember that was before TV, and it was a joke, but they were bored. But he's kind of right. There is a little bit to that. Hey, when you don't have anything else to do, they're probably a little bit more likely it's going to happen. Where if you're career oriented and you're chasing.
Is your family Catholic?
Well, my parents were raised. I'm an atheist, but my parents were.
Yeah, I'm agnostic.
Yeah, my parents raised me as a Catholic. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's the reason you're having a lot of Catholic. That's why you're getting like so many Mexicans coming up and Muslims is because it's religious reasons too. And I think poor people may cling to religion a little more. So you're having a lot more poor Catholics, poor Muslims who are having children. And you're having rich professional agnostics and atheists.
Yeah, but that movie does have some interesting links between eugenics and the American eugenics movement, and then the links to influencing the Nazis, and so it's quite interesting because it does. I think there is. And you look at it, it wasn't that long ago that scientists were talking about Africans being scientifically proven that they were less intelligent than whites. I mean, when the whole thing of race is a complete just social construct. I mean, there's no gene that all white people or black people share. There's no. I mean, people have to understand the reason why people in sunny that have a history of living in sunny places are darker. It's because it's the same reason why I tan when I'm in the sun. Your body is just defending itself, against the sun and the UV rays. That's all it is. It's not, it's because of people from Alaska are white because they're pale because they don't get a lot of sun. So it's this whole idea of race was created to like we talked about in the beginning of the show to give one more reason to create this tribal people, these groups that and turn us against each other, and that's all it is.
And I think that's what I think. What's going on right now is you have a 1/10 of 1%, and they're turning the poor white people against the poor black people. And this is why I feel kind of like the Black Lives Matter movement, because I have friends who are cops, and cops are mostly working class people. They're not because you don't go to Harvard and say, hey, I'm gonna join the police academy. They're working class white people and black people. They're getting orders from the politicians. The politicians are giving them quotas. They're starting the war on drugs. They're taking money from the private prisons. They're saying, you need to fill up our jails. You need to arrest this many people a week. You need to stand on these corners. So, of course, there's going to be tension between the police and the people in this community. And, of course, just like if you send an occupying force to a foreign country, there's going to be civilian casualties. Right? So what you're having is working class, middle to lower class. It's black. A lot of the police who were involved in the Freddie Gray incident were black. The cop who just got convicted of manslaughter was Asian, and you have a lot of Latin, black, and poor working class white is not. And these people taking orders from the politician are kind of taking the brunt of what you have right now, the Black Lives Matter movement. But they're not attacking the government, who are not only oppressing poor people of color here, but oppressing poor people of color all over the world, and white people in Eastern Europe too.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I tell people all the time, I'm like, guess what? If certain things weren't laws, the cops wouldn't be busting your balls about it. I'm like, so when you get mad because a cop arrests you because of weed or whatever, I'm like, that's because he can. I'm like, if it's not a law, he couldn't arrest you for it. He wouldn't be busting your balls about it. So I'm like, you have to understand these guys, and it sucks because when you join the military, when you join, you want to become officer. Sometimes your intentions and your heart are in the right place, and you want to help people. But then you become a part of the system where you have no say. You can't, you really can't be a whistleblower, for lack of a better term.
No,
but because if not, you don't get treated very well because you join this brotherhood, you join this group, and it just it's crazy, because it's just like it really does get our focus off what really the issue is, and that is the politicians who create these ridiculous laws. The politicians, it's like in Connecticut, you have to wear a seatbelt. It's a first offense. I've been pulled over in Connecticut for not wearing a seatbelt because I'm from Massachusetts and I never wear a seatbelt because you don't have to here.
But, Connecticut loves getting people from Massachusetts.
Yeah, well, of course, every state love getting the out of towners, but the thing
is, they know you're not going to show up at the court date.
Exactly, but yet, I mean, this is how ridiculous these laws are. So in Connecticut, for example, you have to wear a seatbelt. It's a first offense, but you don't have to wear a helmet on a fucking motorcycle. Like, What is more unsafe? A car that has to pass all these crash tests, airbags, all this stuff all these safety regulations that they have to make these cars safe, or the guy on a bike without a helmet. But yet you're busting my balls telling me that, hey, the reason why I pulled you over is because, and I remember once a cop's like, the reason why this is a law is because it's here to protect you. You should wear your seatbelt. And I'm watching a guy with no helmet on a bike just fly by. And then I'm like, I shouldn't be mad at this cop because he's just repeating the same shit that he's been told. He's like, this is the law. These are here to protect people and enforce it. And
it's like being mad at the stormtroopers and not Darth Vader and the Emperor. It's focusing on the lowest rung of the people, and it's working class people, and that's why, so I have a lot of, my working class Irish friends. They'll support the police because
a lot of them
they have a cousin who's a policeman, brother who's a policeman, and then they might not know that in black neighborhoods, cops aren't helping people take cats down from trees. They're not responding to rapes. They're not responding to robberies. They're just looking at people for drug offenses. That's the easiest way to do. That's the easiest way to follow your quota. And that's why black people are arrested for marijuana at 10 times the rate as white people are arrested for marijuana. Even though it's pretty much equal. Black people smoke weed at the same rate as white people smoke weed. And get arrested at 10 times the rate.
Look at crack and cocaine.
Exactly. Which is Clinton. Clinton, that's another thing that Clinton did. Not only was it the 3 strikes law and the 94 crime bill, but he also signed into the legislation for the crack versus coke disparity. And Obama changed it. Instead of 100 to 1, it's like 16 to 1. But
yeah, but it is. It's crazy. I mean, the fact that it's quite obvious that there were people who, crack and coke are the same drug and it's the same substance, but yet people who do crack would get more time in jail, and people who did coke wouldn't. And it's insane. You're obviously trying to pick on the people who are buying the cheaper drug.
And it's easier to happen because if you started locking up all the kids at Exeter and Andover and Harvard and Wall Street, and if you started, there would be outrage from their parents, an outrage from their bosses, their employers, the people who paid for that. If you arrested, Wall Street wouldn't run without cocaine. No. I've never tried it myself. It's not my thing, but Wall Street would not run without cocaine. Well, I've been around a lot of, Hollywood, Wall Street, and it's like, party favors. It's like, how you might pass around a appetizer or something at a party, and it's, so.
Oh yeah,
and that's why I'm for legalizing everything. Like I would never do heroin, and I think you should educate people. Don't lie to them. Don't just say don't do drugs and treat weed like it's meth, because then the kid's gonna try weed and they say, hey, I did drugs. It's okay.
Yeah.
The meth. Let me try meth.
Well, I have. I've been to two wakes or 2 funerals in the last 4 months. 4 months. That friends of mine who died from overdoses, and this all spawned from the pill epidemic.
Exactly. Opiates.
Yeah.
We were talking about earlier.
Yeah. All these people were addicted to pills, and then once it got harder to get them, then eventually they looked. Heroin was so cheap, and it was an easy.
And that's also because of the Afghanistan pipeline. Like that's why. During the crack epidemic, coke was so cheap because so much was coming in so easy. The harder something is, and right now, through whatever they say, it's coming through Mexico. But I've heard 90% of the world's heroin is coming from Afghanistan.
I've heard the same thing, that the percentage, and I've seen statistics where it's just like the percentage of a heroin that was coming from Afghanistan at, before we went there was very low, and now it's some ridiculous amount. And there is even a Fox News video of them there, and they were showing U.S. military protecting these fields and
I've seen pictures like that. I mean, I think drugs. I think it's like oil, weapons, drugs are the 3 biggest worldwide industry, and it's a great way for the CIA to have like a quiet private slush fund to do whatever they want and not be accountable to the government at all, because they're not taking government checks. But you just have all these drugs. Like if you had like the Nugan Bank, where they were running all their drug money from Southeast Asia and Australia, which actually Rupert Murdoch was involved with Ted Shackley in the Nugan Bank. So right. And Fox News, of course, started Roger Ailes, who's a Bush guy, and Bush is pretty much the poster child for the CIA.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's funny because Russ Baker talks about how he was in the CIA as early as the early '60s, and
yeah, definitely, and there's documents to prove it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is he has a building, I think in Maryland, named after him. It's like a CIA headquarters named after Bush, and I'm like, who is head of the CIA for 1 year? And
and how do you get to be head of the CIA? Like, I wouldn't be able to be head of the FBI or the head of education without ever being a teacher or being a principal or having something. And there's so many ties between Yale and Skull and Bones and the CIA. It's so many CIA friends.
Prescott Bush and the Nazis.
Yeah, definitely. Prescott Bush was like best friends with Allen Dulles.
Yeah,
they were.
It's crazy, and also there's some links I believe of, and you'll see it in the documentary. There's some links between I think Prescott Bush and funding Margaret Sanger's.
There are. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
So there is. It's crazy.
But I think he was also even like the supporter of the NAACP. Prescott Bush. He's a very interesting character.
Yeah.
And then there was the coup against FDR with Smedley Butler. Smedley Butler.
Yeah, Smedley Butler. War is a Racket. Great book.
Smedley Butler.
Yeah,
War is a Racket.
Yeah. That's crazy because that's a legit. I mean, that really happened. They even investigated that. We're basically a bunch of corporations.
DuPont.
DuPont. We're trying to get this general to start a coup to take down our own government, which we eventually did anyways with JFK. But
exactly. Yeah. I mean, if first you don't succeed, try again, and then they tried.
Oh yeah, and that's why those two events are so I think are so important in history. 9/11 and JFK, because those are two huge events that really changed America dramatically after it. And it just changed things. And I mean, to just think about the idea that the democratically elected president of the United States of America in daylight gets shot in the head, and we blame it all on one dude who obviously has a very secretive past with I mean, you want to talk about documents that aren't released. His tax returns still aren't released. Like there's
Oswald. I mean, Oswald was obviously CIA, and when he was overseas in Russia, he was working for the CIA, and he had the same office as a FBI agent while he was supposedly a pro Castro guy. And
in New Orleans, right?
Yeah, with Bannister. Bannister had the same office as him, and he definitely had and Jack Ruby and his mob connections. But what I have heard is that Oswald was actually working for the FBI, kind of reporting for the CIA, and he stopped an assassination attempt in Kennedy. Well, they said a man named Lee gave information that stopped an assassination attempt in Chicago, but obviously J. Edgar Hoover went around and turned around and covered up the JFK assassination. But I think Meyer Lansky had pictures of him in Tolbert. What was his best friend? Meyer Lansky had pictures of Hoover involved in homosexual activities, so was able to blackmail him to do pretty much anything. And the mob, he was in the mob's pocket.
Yeah, and Hoover and LBJ were good friends. And,
great friends.
Yeah, good. So I mean, who has more incentive than LBJ in the JFK?
And LBJ was also great friends with Prescott Bush.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, and there's some rumor. This is what Roger Stone says that I guess LBJ was going to be taken off the ticket, and Robert Kennedy was going to be.
There was even going to be. I think there was some investigation of some corruption charges he was going to face, and I heard that from more than one source.
Yeah, the Baker, the Baker scandal, something like that.
I mean, LBJ. I've heard somebody with Mac Wallace and all these. LBJ has under his belt.
Yeah. There's That book, The Case Against LBJ, is really interesting because it does.
Yeah, no, he was a definite scumbag, and he was in the pockets of of course the Houston oil man and the mob, and that kind of goes to show, you have Democrats and Republicans, but they're all playing, or some of them are playing for another team that we don't really know who they are.
You ever watch that movie? It's an older movie, Network.
No, no, that's with Robert Redford, right?
I'm really bad with actors.
It's about names. A TV. It's about like a newscast.
The guy who
I might have seen it, but I think I was just paying too much attention.
Yeah. And I sample one of the parts in that film because it's so important. He was talking about this big banker was talking about how there is no Catholic or religion. He's like, there's only DuPont. There's only, this idea that basically all these ideologies don't mean shit. It's all about money, and it's all about corporations and how people can make money. And when it comes down to business deals, all the other things don't matter. Nobody gives a shit if you're white or black or if you come from wherever. If you can help us get power and money, all that stuff goes out the window. You look at Saudis will do business with the U.S.
Israelis. They've been. I mean, in terms of funding, right now with ISIS and Bandar Bush, of course, has been a big figure in terms of forming ISIS, and also with Iran Contra, doing a lot of business with each other, the Saudi Arabians and the Israelis.
And that's the thing. When it comes down to doing business, I mean, if they can help each other, they don't care about the fact that they have some religious war that publicly they're telling everybody. If they can help each other out, they will. I mean, the U.S. I mean, look at it. They helped Israel and they helped Saudis. They don't give a fuck who you are. They'll help both sides. And comes a show. That's why, like, when people will talk about Islamic extremism, and I'm like, there's fucking billions of Muslim people in the world. If they're all extremists, then we'd be fucking dead by now. I'm like, we would have no hope.
I think, and that's another thing, when you've gotten the CIA has been very influential in kind of creating these Islamic extremists from the coup in Iran, which they had a Islamic theocracy. Saddam Hussein was a jerk, but he wasn't a religious fanatic jerk. No. And then if you look what happened to Gaddafi, and this is, Hillary Clinton was very involved and proud of it. She said, we came, we saw, we got him in terms of taking out Gaddafi. And, he was a bad guy. CIA was working with him, helping funding him back in the days with Frank Turple, Thomas Clines, Ed Wilson. But, and he had issues. He fought against apartheid. He criticized Israel. He had definitely was not an ideal leader, but he was a secular guy. Women had rights under him. And then they take him out, and these Islamic extremists come over, and they start killing all the black people there because they, Gaddafi was employing African mercenaries. So once they took out Gaddafi, they started killing every black person.
That's the thing. And are these countries any better? And that's the other thing.
Not at all.
You look at Saddam. We were okay with Saddam. We funded him at one point, and then we call him a terrorist. You look at Gaddafi. We do business with Gaddafi, then we call him a threat. I mean, it's
Noriega.
Noriega. I mean, it's over and over again. Where if you're fighting against one of our enemies, then you're our friend, and then the second you're not looking after our interests, then we'll turn on you. And
exactly.
And it's amazing how many elections. I mean, everything from the Congo to to like you said, Iran and in the what was it, the early 70s when they took
50s.
Or the 50s, yes.
50s. It was Guatemala and Iran were like two of the first big CIA coups.
Yeah, Anglo-American Oil, and the new president didn't want to do business with them or didn't want to give them the contract, so they wanted to nationalize some oil fields, so they got involved. I mean, it's just it's
even Afghanistan, when under the Russians, they were communists. They were a secular government. They weren't religious fanatics, and then like the propaganda. If you watch Rambo 3. Rambo is helping Bin Laden and the Taliban fight against the Russians.
That is so true. I forgot about that. That's hilarious.
and then at the end, they changed it. They had two endings. The first ending said, "This movie is dedicated to the brave men and women of the Mujahideen." That's what it said. It was dedicated to Mujahideen, the first Rambo. Whoa. And then after the terrorism started changing, they said, "This is dedicated to the brave Afghan freedom fighters."
That is crazy. That is hilarious. Yeah. It's so true because I mean now you watch every show and it's the bad guy's always Russian. It's always some Russian bad guy. It's obviously propaganda. They're trying, and that's the thing. They're planting the seed of picture every Russian.
Even in video games, like Oliver North is in Call of Duty playing a hero. I'm like, how is this war criminal cocaine seller a hero in your video game? These kids are playing Call of Duty and you're saying, hey, I want to go to war. This is cool. It's going to be just like that. And then
they come back with PTSD and a heroin problem.
Oh, absolutely. And then we don't care. That's the thing. Everybody's all.
No, we don't care.
Yeah, we're all for the troops. When
support our troops
when they're there.
Support our war. Support our wars. Don't support the troops.
Yeah, good point. That's what it should say. Support the war, because once they come back, that we could care less. And
I've had friends come back with serious PTSD, and it's depressing, and it's like, oh man.
Oh yeah, and then all the private companies that make money, from KBR to Halliburton to Blackwater, all these
these companies have been going bad. They've been tied to the Bush family and CIA forever. KBR, Halliburton, Blackwater or what, Academy, something, whatever it is now.
Name a few times, because
but it's the same people, same things. Yeah, it's the same. But they've been all the same people profiting off wars. Military-industrial complex.
Oh, absolutely. There's
running ever since Eisenhower warned against them, and before that probably.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, when you think a president on, one of his last public, times that's really put out a message to the public, the fact that he wanted to emphasize the military-industrial complex, I mean, that should tell you something, that even, and knowing as much as he did.
And he was a general.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, so he should be pro-military.
Yeah.
But I think he knows that, because he was a little bit of a part of creating it, too, and...
Well, he was. Well, in terms of and Nixon, of course, was his vice president, and Nixon was another person, a disciple of Prescott Bush.
Yeah.
But they said it was Nixon who kind of started the anti-Castro movement towards the end. When Fidel took over in '59 and started, this Operation 40, these anti-Castro terrorists who went on to become drug dealers, assassins, and JFK assassination, Watergate, Iran-Contra, Jamaica, the Air America, and all the heroin and opium being moved through Laos and Cambodia to America, because they don't care about the American people at all. They could die in wars, they could have drug addictions and whatever, just as long as their companies make money.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and I think when you have when you destabilize places, it's easier to control it. You get these extremists. I mean, in the Middle East, I think it was Vice that did a article about how many terrorists they create on every drone attack. And and I always make the example. I'm like, if you were average person, just at a coffee shop having a coffee with a loved one or whatever, and then a drone comes and shoots it up, and a lot of times there's a lot of casualties who aren't involved in who they're trying to get because their accuracy isn't good, and then you have a loved one that dies, and that drone was controlled by the U.S. government. You're forever gonna hate the U.S. government, and you just created a terrorist. And we have to put ourselves in their shoes and their perspectives. And even the thing with the whole Syrian refugees, it's just like people are just, oh, fuck them. I'm like, we created this mess. I'm like,
definitely. And to get rid of, and Assad is another example of a moderate Muslim. Again, not at all a perfect guy, but starting, I think there's pictures of McCain with some of the, because there was, I remember the old ISIS documentary, and the main guy, I think he died eventually, but it was the ISIS head of communications. And I recognized him from that picture with McCain. I'm like, hold up. That's the guy from the Vice documentary right next to McCain, and it's the ISIS guy. And I don't believe it's a mistake anymore. I think they realize that there's money in war, because they've made this mistake so many times.
Yeah,
they made this. They made this mistake with the drug cartels. They make these mistakes with the Mujahideen. They make this mistake with Al Qaeda. They make this mistake. They realize that they make money off war. So no matter what, they win. If people are buying weapons, they're winning. So they're winning. I mean, they got all these Toyota trucks. ISIS is getting Toyota trucks, American weapons. Like, okay, they're getting them from somewhere.
Yeah, and a lot of the heads of ISIS are all ex-generals and stuff of Saddam and in Iraq. And yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, publicly, we're telling people that we're fighting ISIS in Syria, but yet, how can we fight ISIS and take down Assad, because they're fighting each other? So obviously it's bullshit. We're funneling weapons to moderate rebels. It's like,
a rebel is not moderate. There's never been a moderate rebel.
Exactly.
If you're taking out a gun and you want to kill someone, you're not moderate. You're extreme on some reason. Like,
exactly.
If you're an American revolutionary, you extremely hate the British. You're not like, hey, I want to negotiate with the British with my gun.
Yeah.
And
It's so ridiculous. And people who just regurgitate that, they'll be like, "Oh, it's the moderate."
The moderates.
I'm like, what the fuck is a moderate rebel? And I mean, how would you even come to the conclusion that they're moderate? Like, do you have a multiple question? Yeah, multiple answer question, and then are you?
Should women wear burqas? Should you execute homosexuals? Should you stone people for adultery?
Yeah, it's hilarious. I mean, that would make like a great cartoon. Just but it's hilarious because I think the thing is people will just watch the news and people will just regurgitate this and just take it in and be like, yeah, we're giving weapons to moderate rebels, no big deal. And it's like there's people here who live in shitty communities. We have roads that are falling apart, schools that are falling apart.
Especially I have friends in like Boston's nice. Boston and Cambridge where I live is super nice, but my friend lives in Worcester. He tells me they don't pick up the trash for weeks. The roads are horrible. Like, I think you're getting like cities like New York and Boston, LA. You're getting nice treatment there. You're getting nice roads, nice streets, great bars, restaurants. But then you're getting your Detroits falling apart. Your Camden, New Jerseys. Your Rochesters. Your Albanys, and these cities are just.
Yeah, but yet we're spending all this money on Tomahawk missiles and weapons to kill people we don't know for reasons we can't understand, and that's the thing. It's all just nonsense. And I'm glad that you briefly talked about how your music now is, because I know you did music back. You've done music for a while, right? You did.
Music is how I got into writing, because I was in music, and I would start blogging for hip hop sites, and then from the hip hop sites I got I started working for a news site. I left it alone, but I'm back at it. I'll definitely send you some. I have a song, "Cocaine Business," which is about the same subject of the book.
And before, initially, you weren't political, right? You didn't really.
No, well, I was super pro Obama in 2008. I'm biracial. I went to Columbia. I like The Wire, and he was biracial. Went to Columbia, like The Wire. So I thought this guy was like this great savior.
But I did hear you say you haven't seen any pictures of Obama at Columbia.
At Columbia, no, I can't. And I've been searching for them, and that, which is crazy.
That is weird.
Or you can't find too many people who say they knew him when I was there. I'm not denying the fact that he was there, or even an ID. Because if when they say Obama at Columbia, I see a picture of him at Central Park. Central Park is nowhere near Columbia. Like, if you do a Google image search Obama Columbia, you'll see him Central Park, or him in an apartment with his friend. Like, I understand, like, now in the era where everyone has pictures everywhere, but I have so many pictures on the steps of Columbia, all the landmarks. And all that stuff. And to go to Columbia, right, it's not an ideal school to transfer to. So we transferred 2 years, and we have a core curriculum. So you have to take so many courses. And you're supposed to start when you're a freshman, balance them out. If you don't take it's one of the most rigid core curriculums of any college. So you need to take all this. So to come and graduate in 2 years, you're pretty much half of your time is going to be for the core curriculum. But so and this is, again, I don't want to get into theories, but Obama's mother worked for the Ford Foundation and USAID in Indonesia. Ford Foundation, CIA front. USAID, CIA front. He went on to work for the Business International Corporation. That was his first job out of college. Not a community activist. Business International, CIA front. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm definitely disappointed.
Well, they do a lot of recruiting in colleges, Yeah.
And even his grandfather had some type of. I mean, I don't know if he was OSS, but he was naval something. Yeah.
Well, what was it? The Unabomber was a part of the MK Ultra project. He was. I think he was teaching at Harvard,
he went to Harvard.
Yeah, he went to Harvard, and he was recruited to be a part of that. And a lot of people believe that there's some link between that and him going crazy. And,
even Timothy Leary and the whole LSD phenomenon, like I think I don't know in terms of drugs kind of taking out movements. Definitely the Black Power movement was affected by heroin, and you could even say the hippie movement was kind of.
Oh, did I lose you? You still there? Oh, okay.
Started paying attention to what was going on and realized what happened. I think even guys like Crosby, Stills, and Nash were talking about the JFK assassination.
Well, the thing about Timothy Leary, because I just had Dennis McKenna on, who was a part of the LSD, looking into it, and he's huge into his institute that he works for, his research institute, Hefter, is similar to like MAPS with Rick Dublin, and where they look for how MDMA and LSD and all these things can help out with PTSD and depression and all this stuff. And he was good friends with Tim Leary, and they researched this stuff and really looked into it. And I've heard a lot of conflicting arguments. I've heard people say that, hey, Terrence McKenna was in CIA and it was all about trying to dumb down the population. But I've seen a lot of the opposite. I mean, you see a lot of musicians, comedians, Bill Hicks. You look at Bob Marley obviously smoked weed. You had a lot of people, Jimi Hendrix, a lot of these people, and even the anti-war movement in the 60s, a lot of these people, I think, weren't easily brainwashed into believing the propaganda because you took something that possibly took you out of your regular routine and your rhythm and made you look at things from different perspectives. So I'm not sold that it's, I've heard, and again, I don't know either way, and I just...
I don't know, but I know through MK also that the CIA was involved in creating
LSD. They did. Yeah, and they had, Project Midnight Climax, where they set up a brothel and they had a two-way mirror. And we're watching, they were basically giving people LSD and seeing how they were reacting, and so they took kids who were in orphans, homeless people, and they were fucking around with shock therapy, LSD, all this stuff during the MK Ultra project, and which is pretty insane because this was taxpayer money going to basically torturing these people, and mentally destabilizing them forever. And so it's pretty insane. So I definitely know of that. So but I think that anything that the government or special ops or the military can weaponize, they will. So if they think that they could have some benefit with LSD and using it as a brainwashing tool, I could see.
Course. And from what I've read is that the CIA also created Google, and I wrote my book with Google. I used Google really well. I found out about the CIA and what they were doing through their all these cables and these declassified documents and old articles. I used Google to find out about them. So just because they are involved in the creation doesn't mean that it can't be used against them. So
that's true, absolutely true. But thanks so much. This was an awesome conversation. I think we hit on about a billion topics. And you ever in the Western Mass area, or I guess?
Not really much, but I could make my way out there. I have a friend in Worcester.
Yeah, that's not too far. Yeah,
man.
There's no reason to come
inside the CIA Secret War in Jamaica. Plug my book.
Yeah, definitely. I'll put links to your book in the show descriptions. Definitely check it out. I'll put the link so it's easy to get to. And where is it available? Is it on your
Amazon?
Website?
Amazon mostly. Amazon's the easiest way. And if you could ask for it at your local bookstore, maybe they'll order it. But I don't know if they'll have it. But ask for it at bookstore for me, and then buy it on Amazon.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, because again, if people start asking for it, then they'll look into it and possibly start carrying it. Yeah, so if you want to do that, definitely do that. Definitely look into starting your own podcast. You're into a lot of the same shit I'm into, and the cool thing about people like you and I who are into different things is that I've had singers of Fear Factory on, and Mike Martins from All That Remains, and singer of Anta Shikari. So and then I've had comedians on, and they have nothing to do with some of this other alternative history or corruption in our history and stuff like that. So it's cool to have a show where you can kind of just gather anybody you find interesting and hope that you get some people who don't know about these authors and filmmakers and maybe expose some new fans to them and vice versa, So, it's kind of my way of trying to do that, because I think that's the one thing about, like you were saying, sometimes you're preaching to the choir. If you have always the same type of guests, always the same type of people, only fans of those people are going to come and listen. Where and I don't do it. I guess I didn't do it purposely when I started the show. I just wanted to have anybody on that I found interesting, but and people that I'm a fan of. But after looking at it, I'm like, you know what? This is really helping get people who aren't familiar with these other people, get them to be like, oh, I like this show. Let me check out who else they had on. Oh shit, I never knew this. I never knew that. So you hope that in that way you can kind of expose people to some new stuff and do our part, because I think that's the goal. Is we're all trying to do our part into trying to leave the world a little better than we received it. And if we're all on team people, and trying to make the world a better place. And that's the thing. I think we all can. I mean, obviously, I named it the Ripple Effect Podcast because I truly believe in all of us.
Yeah,
you know,
it's a good name.
Yeah, I mean, in all of us, because I think that a lot of times we tend to believe, oh well, what difference can I make? What can I do? You know, I'm just a nobody. I mean, I'm not famous for anything. I mean, my music was, I was in a band for years. I did some music on the side now, but I started this with nobody knowing me, and to be able to have people like you reach out to me, to be able to have, you know, Rick Ross on, Jesse Ventura, Abraham Bull. I mean, it's amazing, and to do my part into trying to, you know, spread this information and like your book, get people to read, because I actually have a few Jamaican friends that I told about having you on, and I'm like, I got a podcast that you might be interested in. You might learn a little bit about some alternative history of Jamaica you might not know about. And which
I learned a lot doing the research. There's a whole bunch of stuff I didn't know, and thank God, you know, you had, I think it was I don't know if it's Snowden or Men, who released all these Kissinger cables. And I recommend anyone just to look at them yourself and look up what the American government is doing to any of these countries. You can just search anyone in these cables and you can get so much information. And this is information that the government didn't want you to have. So that's, you know, it's kind of important stuff.
Have you ever seen The Trials of Henry Kissinger, the documentary?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Yes, I have, with Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah, Christopher Hitchens, which is funny because my one critique of Christopher Hitchens is how he did a book and a documentary talking about basically the real intentions of our foreign policy, but then yet he was pro-Iraq war because he was so anti-Muslim. And I'm like, dude, you're falling for the same propaganda, you know?
I mean, I think you see what the same thing with Bill Maher even.
Good point, yeah.
And I guess I'm kind of anti-religion, and I think any religion you take, you can use it for evil purposes. And I think a lot of the reasons you do have these extremes, and you know, there's a lot of bad stuff in the Quran, there's a lot of bad stuff in the Bible, and there's a lot of good stuff in the Quran, a lot of good stuff in the Bible. But what our government is doing is putting in power these awful extremists, and then bombing them and making them even more extreme.
Yeah, and we're destabilizing countries and putting people in there who just are even worse. And not just that, like a lot of these terrorists, I mean, you look at the 9/11 hijackers, they're doing cocaine, hanging out with strippers. These aren't people who are pro-Sharia law. I mean, these people are you know, they don't know much about, and then I think, what was it, San Bernardino? It wasn't San Bernardino. It was the Paris attackers who just a couple weeks before the terrorist attack, they ordered the book, The Quran for Dummies and Islam for Dummies. I mean, these people aren't extreme Muslims who are doing a lot of this. It's not really, and like you said, you could substitute religion with many other things. Being patriotic and nationalism. I mean, people who go to war.
Anti-communism. Like the CIA, the terrorists that they supported, which I get into in my book. You know, these anti-Castro terrorists who, you know, kill lots of innocent civilians in the name of anti-communism. And I think once you have a goal that diminishes human life, saying, yeah, it's okay for me to kill people because my greater goal is worth it, and that's what you get in wars. That's what you know. That's, I mean, terrorism. I mean, I don't know why drones aren't terrorists. I guess there's robotic terrorists.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's a great debate between. I don't think it was supposed to be a debate, but it ended up eventually turning into a debate with Sam Harris and Dan Carlin, who does our hardcore history. He's been on the podcast too. If you like history, he has a really good.
I love history.
Yeah, he has a really good podcast, Hardcore History, and actually another podcaster who comes on quite a bit, and author Daniele Bignelli. He has one that he just started called History on Fire, which is another really good podcast on history. But they get into a debate about you know, is it Islam or is it, you know, just the idea of creating destabilizing people and finding like those people will find other reasons to do those things. You know, the same way you can get somebody to pull a trigger based on defending their country, you can do it, you know, to defend a Bible.
I mean, look at the kamikaze pilots for Japan. You know, they were doing it for national pride, and they were like, they believe, hey, I sacrificed myself for this greater good, whether it be national pride, religion, capitalism, communism.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, technically, we were terrorists when I wasn't even born in this country, but I was raised there. But we were terrorists when we're going around in, you know, communist countries or socialist countries, and then getting involved in their elections and funneling. We talked about the School of Americas, giving weapons and training people who end up being murderers, and so I mean. It's like that saying: one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. It's
definitely
all,
Rambo.
Yeah, it's all perspective, you know. So it really is all perspective. And we have to see it that way. I mean, if you live in Yemen and there's a drone, over your head, and that's a terrorist, and so I mean, there's no other way to look at it. So I think we have.
I mean, Luke Skywalker and the rebels were terrorists, and they were launching terrorist attacks on imperial space stations.
Yeah, and this country got their independence when we turned against England to get our independence from the empire. We were considered domestic terrorists. I mean, we were basically we were terrorists.
Guerrilla warfare.
Yeah, because we
created it.
Yeah, we were fighting against those in power to get our for our independence. I mean, that's what a lot of people do in other countries. So and also the other thing too is we shouldn't be getting in. I mean, we've gotten involved. You talked about McCain. McCain was in Ukraine during those protests, and he was he's been all over the world. When Egypt, the U.S. got involved in the Egyptian elections, with the links to the Muslim Brotherhood and all that stuff. So I mean, we get even today, we're getting involved in the political outcomes of so many different elections all over the world. And who are we to do that? And why shouldn't we let the people decide their own outcome and their own? The thing is, they'll have a revolution. And if enough people decide that they want to revolt, they'll revolt. They don't need our help, and they don't need us deciding which side we're going to pick. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, man.
Well, thanks again, Casey. Definitely.
Thanks for having me, Ricky. So let's be in touch over email, and I'm gonna keep on checking for your podcast. You have all of these people that I've been checking for, so definitely. Yeah, keep checking to see who you got next. Hit me to some new stuff.
Yeah, check it out. I've always tried to get interesting people. I've been very lucky, knock on wood, and definitely check out Inside the CIA Secret War in Jamaica. It's on Amazon. I'll have the links in the show description, and check that out. And hopefully I have you on again, because
definitely. I love you on again.
Yeah, I mean, I love having these type of conversations where it's just like laid back. And I actually go to Boston quite a bit to go to Celtics games and shit like that. So
nice.
Next one in Boston, I'll hit you up and see if you want to grab a drink sometime.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks, Casey. Appreciate it.
All right, Ricky.
Thanks.
Yeah. Peace.
The United States government likes his right-wing stance and channels support through the CIA.
Cocaine business control Jamaica, CIA a big major player. Assman like Manuel Noriega, crack cocaine a big money maker. USA want put in Tiaga, so them ship the guns to the shatters. Sell cocaine, burn up the ganja, not deal with CIA, say the Rasta.
The money was used to buy guns, which were distributed to party activists in the ghetto.
Cocaine business control Jamaica, ganja business control Jamaica. Cocaine business control America, ganja business control America. Pistol business control Jamaica, rifle business control Jamaica. Pistol business control America, crystal business control America.
Kingston erupted in an orgy of violence.
CIA informer, Assman like they want Cecil Garner. Guns and drugs, political drama. CIA them start up the saga. Same thing happen in Nicaragua. Sell cocaine, arm up the contra. Who ya think train on the bomber? Osada and run like Osama. Opium business control Afghanistan. Opium business control Pakistan. Cocaine business control Colombia. Cocaine business control Bolivia. Cocaine business control Jamaica. Ganja business control Jamaica. Cocaine business control America. Ganja business control America.
Look at the man in terms of how the community respects and teaching as a protector of their community.
gunmen who survived, many have since become Yardis.